jump on the
You can ask
webinar.
the planning commission if there were any volunteers.
And then
The dogs
start
up there.
the,
Oh, there we
the
go.
play
They
button.
did, but they were getting asked for volunteers to see who wanted to be on this.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So we are live now. And we should have some of the committee members joining us. Usually you click on this and just that way I can show you.
Oh, Rob's signing.
As soon as people sign in, let's give them a hello.
Rob, can you hear us?
Yes.
So, you know,
Rob can hear us. We can't hear him. So let's
Didn't get it out far.
it's over here.
They're there.
I was thinking it has to be on the Zoom.
Hey, Rob, can you speak again?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. So
However you want.
thanks. We'll be underway in just a second, Rob.
Very good.
And we can hear him through that. And we're
Until it's in place and then they comment they don't like. it.
Yeah. I'll try to be a little before that.
then
That's
should
good.
we start these?
Yes.
All the meetings are like, how do you do that? Okay. Well, we've got three.
So in theory, you can technically start the meeting. You just can't do any action if you don't have a quorum.
Well, okay. That sounds good.
Camera, okay.
You can angle a little bit. So let me ask one thing, Grant, of Rob. Hey, Rob, are you able to hear Grant when he's talking?
Yes.
Perfect. That's it.
Okay. Very good. Okay, we can start the meeting. Can we do a thought of prayer without a quorum? That's not business, is it? We do a thought of prayer.
Yeah, we just
Okay.
can't take votes.
Right, well, we just can't take votes. Okay. Like to welcome everybody. Any volunteers to give us a thought or lead us in the pledge? I'll be happy to do that. I'll be happy to do that. That's why we start with the pledge. Please follow me in pledge of allegiance. We pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The thought I have tonight is how important people are to us in this community. Every individual is important. And I think sometimes we overlook that, and it's easy to do. But people who we serve and people with whom we work, I think deserve the best of our attention. Everything. Certainly they're understood and their points are heard. That's the way democracy works. I was just reading Thomas Paine's Common Sense. That was one of the inspirational pieces for the Revolutionary War. First time I read it, I decided I was going to be a journalist, and I just that was too rough of a career. But one of the things that we focused on, and part of the reason for the revolution, was because government quit paying attention to the citizens. And over time, the colonies just got tired of it and said, enough is enough. And I hope we never get to the point in this community where any citizen feels that way. I'd also like to request that we take a moment of silence in behalf of John Arrington. She was a wonderful woman. John's feeling lost this time. So if we take a minute of silence. Okay, thank you. Let's, we want John to know that he has our condolences and our sympathy. And anything we can do to be of assistance at this time is great. Active agenda, we can't approve the minutes. The active agenda, we'll move on to that. Public comments, so we can listen to public comments. So please identify yourself and come up to. Yeah, that's a good one.
Should gesture to this earlier.
Come up to the picture, pulpit, and give us your sermon. Okay.
Fantastic. So my name is Josh Hughes, and I'm actually from Syracuse, Utah. I work with a gentleman named Doug Rich, and we are working with the Chamberlain family on developing some of their property. Their property is one of the islands currently not annexed into North Ogden, and they, I guess at their request, we're starting hopefully the annexation process soon here. And just wanted to kind of put a bug in the committee's ear as you guys consider the general plan and possible amendments to that. The Chamberlain property, as you may or may not be familiar with, is between Loman View Drive and Pleasant View Drive. It's about 6 acres. And it's directly west of the North Ogden. There's a North Ogden, I don't know exactly what it is, facility there. That's like maybe your public works facility. Yeah, and then directly east of us is a property that I believe Johnny Hanson maybe just had rezoned, maybe even last night, to R3. Oh, it got tabled. Okay. So our interest there, and I guess as you guys think through the general plan, right now the general plan identifies it as low density residential. It is immediately adjacent to what's kind of identified as the downtown. And so between being adjacent to the downtown on Pleasant View Drive, which the city has identified as a major collector, and then between what's really an institutional and government use, but in all practicality is kind of an industrial use when you look at the building. And then next to sandwiched between potentially townhomes, we think it would be more appropriate to look at a little higher density use there. Not in the way of like apartments or anything like that. Probably a higher density single family use or a higher density townhome use that might be better for that location. More appropriate. I don't think we're going to be able to sell, $700,000 houses, right on top of that warehouse next to the towns.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions from the committee?
No, I mean, that's definitely an area we're looking at, talking about, but the council had, I felt had some feelings about that area that were talked about last night too. So that would maybe be a good indicator too, but yeah, I mean, that's good to know.
Can I just clarify, this is the old public works building?
I know.
It's right here, Julie, I have a mark. I'm marked in orange.
Oh, good.
Yeah, literally on the north border, Loman View Drive, south border.
Can you see it right in there? That's yeah, I marked it where it's Weaver County still, so it's gonna be either all or a part of that, but that's right there, there it is.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was in the right spot.
That's the old car.
Not familiar with that.
Before anybody's done.
Gotcha. But anyway, we know it's way down the road. I'll review the minutes from last night to kind of see, like you said, maybe the city council's thoughts on that area, but just appreciate you guys keeping it in mind for us.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
We'll be doing some things this evening that both the developers may want
To hear.
may want to hear. And
Fantastic.
may have an interest in. We'll be discussing some things tonight.
Let's stick around.
So, very good. Do we have a role of anybody who's on?
We just have Rob Scott.
Rob Scott on there.
Do we have enough that we have a quorum here at all?
No, so we can't take any action.
Okay,
But
That's
adding one
why-
more.
we can't approve the minutes or anything, right?
Right.
Okay, let's see. Dan can't be here. Christina said she couldn't come, so that's. Are we counting? Well, I guess we're counting city council and everybody's members, so that's. 14.
I wonder if we take this opportunity, since we've got Ryan here, we're not official quorum, the three of us can
Yeah.
talk about this and what we went on to, because
Yeah.
your list is something that I would love to talk about with the whole
After we
group.
get through this, yeah.
And then we can talk about some of the clustering areas we talked about with Ryan and get an idea, because if he can even discuss it with council, I think that's.
Kind of warm them up, because there are some things we're thinking, and then some of the stuff that will go up over in discussion tonight may provide a whole paradigm shift. It certainly did for me when I started to see some alternatives, and I think we've been trying to stick square pegs and round holes and stuff that just doesn't fit and so on, and there's some flexibility that things that we can do that are really cool, as a city.
And we do have Rob, Rob has his
Yeah, for the
discussion
presentation
as well, so.
Oh, should we have him go first? We should, because he's.
Well, let's see. Let's reorder the agenda and let Rob go now, and then we'll have John. Is that okay?
Sure.
Super.
Do we
So
have-
Rob doesn't
Are
have
we
to-
running it like an official meeting, even without a quorum, or can we just?
Yeah, you run it just like a
We can
regular
run it,
meeting.
but
Okay.
we can be more casual about
Yeah, I mean,
Any objections
usually
to
we're,
reordering the agenda
usually
so
we're
we can
more
hear
casual.
Rob
it.
now?
Okay. I think that's great.
Great, okay.
I was like,
Rob, let us know what's up. Excited.
Well, I'm happy to be a part of this discussion this evening. And as you have been working together over the past many months and what have you, it's taken me a while to kind of figure out maybe how I could help provide some framework to your discussions regarding potential amendments to our general plan. And it finally came to me that it might be helpful to take a look at the section called definitions that are in the beginning of the general plan, and it references our general plan map.
Okay.
So it sounds like that there's a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, is there any way we can access that through our electronics here, being as we don't have a network?
we're trying to pull it up.
Okay.
Sorry, Rob, it's being a little slow.
Comcast is showing what happens when you have a big conglomerate that's kind of the big fish in the pond.
Well, maybe while we're waiting for that, maybe I just share a little bit about what we've been working on with respect to the land use code that we're working with consultants on. And as a part of that, one of the things that we've discovered is that we knew that there are parts of our ordinance that were definitely out of date. And one of the things that we have hit upon is the significance of the relationship, the way our current ordinance is written regarding our multifamily zones, even our single family zones, and our PUD ordinance, which allows for some flexibility in design. And as I have been reviewing that with the group in that, one of the things that we found is that there's very minimal differences between the R3, for example, and R4 zones. The density of the two zones are within 4 units per acre. When you calculate the density in the formula in the code, it's exactly the same. The only difference is the number of units that you can have in a building. Hence the difference. I won't go through the math with you relative to that. But we have been determining that it would be much more helpful if there were some general parameters for some of these density numbers, recognizing that as part of that, that there needs to be some good standards for design, but also some flexibility when we have unique circumstances with projects. So I don't, your job is not to define the code or anything like that, but what I've created for you as a starting point is to start looking at the reasonableness for these various uses that are on our map, and that how that they can be a bit more focused, not only on the map, but there may be some need to go back and take a look at the verbiage of the text for the various sections talking about housing or commercial or economic development or the various land use topics. So what I've done is what's in the red text is what I've created for you for your consideration. And then what's in black is the existing language. So I've tried to give you some parameters to help you understand how these things work. And I've also tried to take into account my perceptions of some of the things that you've been talking about relative to various topics. For example, the topic of conservation, et cetera. So I don't know, I know that was a late send out. So I don't know if any of you have even had a chance to read through this.
I have.
So it might,
Today.
so it might be worth our time to just spend a few minutes and hit a few highlights on some of the things that are a part of this for your consideration. So first of all,
That'd be great, Rob.
okay. So the first paragraph was trying to do a little summary of what was intended here. So basically it says the definitions for land uses are a general description of the various land use types within the city of North Ogden. They are meant to assist in the identification of parameters of the general plan and assist in formulating an understanding of the goals, policies, and strategies of the individual plan chapters. So being a little redundant here, this may be repetitive, hopefully not, but it might be. Recognizing the role of the general plan versus the ordinances that are created from that. The general plan is our policy document, and the implementation of that general plan in large part comes through the establishment of ordinances and standards. And as such, what I've tried to do, instead of having very limited descriptions, tried to share some of the things that we've encountered over the years that might help in further identifying the relationship of those specific land use types. So maybe we can take a look at the first one, which is agricultural lands. You can see that the basic statement is a very generic statement. What I've tried to do is to identify the relationship to the RE20 zone, which is, we're actually going to rename that one from suburban residential to rural residential. Is going to be the title of the new title for RE20, but in any case, it's the predominant zone in our agricultural lands. However, there are R1 zone properties with our agricultural lands that will transition into residential projects. Agriculture is also allowed as an accessory use within the residential zones. And agriculture is part of the historical fabric of North Ogden. You've shared that on a number of occasions. And as a part of that, conservation of these lands is a desirable alternative that will require the enactment of a preservation program. you'll recall that there was a discussion here some meetings ago where we talked a little bit about, for example, a transfer development rights program is one potential tool to accomplish that. So in putting this together, it was trying to broaden a little bit our perspective of the relationship of ag lands within the city. And there's no magic to this. If there are other things that we should be incorporating and describing within this, then I would love to get any feedback relative to that. And we could certainly incorporate that within the description of ag lands, as well as any other lands as far as that, any other use types. So a companion to ag lands is our conservation areas. And you realize that on our general plan map, and there's a description of that, we have some identification on that future land use map that there's a crosshatched area that talks about retaining agricultural heritage of the community. And so again, I'm being a little repetitive here, but the TDR program or other preservation techniques are needed in order to implement this designation. So sometimes we end up trying to reflect that conservation areas are in and of themselves a specific land use type, but really it's a technique for the preservation, if you will, of specific lands. Does that make sense?
It does to some of us. Anybody have any questions about that? Nope. Move us on.
Okay, so rural residential. So I coupled all of these, this first section together. So lands anticipated to remain in large lots, 1/2 acre and larger, that can include limited agricultural activities. And then I've added the RE20 zone is compliant with the 1/2 acre standard. Conservation lands are also part of rural residential lands. So again, it's a description with respect to that land use type. So those three areas really all kind of blend together if you really think about it in those terms. Then I've given I've added a kind of a preamble to our residential zones. But was there any other comments from that first grouping? Any other discussion on that?
No, I just have a question. When you talk about the transfer of development rights, that's back to you keep this and somewhere else the city's got to give increased density. Is that the concept you're talking about? Or are you talking about the city actually purchasing development rights for a particular area so it remains an agricultural area, and the folks who own it are actually compensated now for some of what they would have if they developed it?
Yeah, it actually encompasses both of those techniques. And it just a lot depends on what is the city willing to step forward to do. Are there private sector folks that are interested in pursuing something like this? There's even a technique called the purchase of development rights program.
Right.
That's another alternative. So there's lots of examples around the country of these types of activities. It's really dependent on the will of our policymakers and how far do they want to go in pursuing that type of an activity.
Well, and there's such a need to preserve those lands that we probably ought to push the legislature to do matching funds for communities where they want to do it. You know, because frankly, the agricultural lands benefit the general population, not just the specific area where they're located. But that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah,
Thanks, Rob. Okay, move on.
Sure. Yeah,
Residential zones.
yeah, there are several programs, the Lee Ray McAllister Fund and so forth, but I think those are a little bit more oriented to agricultural lands that are true agricultural lands, farming and so forth.
Well, yeah, the McAllister funds, if I remember, are kind of focused on trails and preservation of pathways for those trails and so on. Because he was a big hiker. But yeah, great, thank you. Residential zones.
Okay, so I've given you some background relative to several things in this section. There, first of all, it's just a basic description that we have a variety of zones within our ordinance, and that variety of housing types and densities are an important part of that variety. And our general plan, very specifically, as your work with the low and moderate income housing section, you're very familiar with the fact that that's as a priority for not only the city, but also for the state. In addition, there are other compatible uses allowed within residential zones. So sometimes people, when I meet with them, they only reflect on, oh, this is zoned for single family residential, and that's the only use allowed. But if you look at the zones, we have quite a list of uses, including religious institutions, et cetera. The next point is that there are design options that go beyond these typical subdivision layouts. And I noticed you want to do some discussion about clustering, but also city options for clustering and planned developments are viable options that in my mind should be encouraged. The current ordinance really doesn't provide, in my review, any real incentive to go in that direction. Also,
I just kind of want to tip my bias on that. I've done quite a bit of reading on that, and across the country where those are used, they're great. There are actually some places where cities have used that unit development overlay, zoning overlay, to actually preserve a historic house within, a developmental area. So there's some cool options that provides that aren't on the table now that I think some developers may be pretty interested in pursuing. Thanks. That's just my bias.
well, that's the point, that it's not, when you start looking at incentives, it's not just strictly the relationship of that particular project to the land that sits there. It might include adjoining uses like the example you just gave. So I think that's really a good example. So the next point is that density ranges should not be used. They should be used as a guide and not as absolutes. We seem to get involved with formulas, and we end up with folks who may be a little nervous about having some increased density in their neighborhood or whatever, and they end up making arguments that refer to traffic or other kinds of things as an excuse to not really delve into what the potential project and how it's going to benefit not only the neighborhood, but the community. So there's a recognition that these varying housing types and densities, they can be located adjacent to one another, given appropriate buffering and design standards. And the general plan doesn't need to identify those specific things. If those types of things, and I believe they're already in our general plan, if they are looked at seriously, then the ordinances, I think, could be modified to provide more of an encouragement there. Sorry about that. The next point is that there is a growing need for housing types, for a variety of housing types throughout the city. And these are accommodated through the allowance of planned developments, including the R15 zone in all of the low density areas. There's also small vacant parcels that are interspersed in developed neighborhoods that have difficulty in meeting our standards for green development properties. What I mean by green development properties, it's undeveloped property or vacant property. So providing for some infill standards for those circumstances, I think should also be considered. So those are my general thoughts relative to the overall look at our residential zones. So we've got the traditional low, medium, and high densities. I've given some additional thought to how that could be orchestrated. Again, I've put in low density lots with 5,000 square feet and larger. I don't think that number should necessarily be the number. Density 1 to 8 units per acre. R1 zones are compliant with this designation. Plan unit development provisions with attached housing in the R15 zone are part of these property development options. To me, though, it's important to be able to have those options available. It's sort of interesting to have been in as many public hearings as I've been in, and individuals have a tendency to feel like that the sky is falling. It seems like our mantra is we really don't like change in our life, in our society, but some of these things, as I have observed them, seems to me that can be done in a way in which it's not going to impact other development, but it's going to provide additional opportunities and housing choices. So the medium density one, just I've given some numbers, 4 to 8, and density range 8 to 14 units. R15, R2, R3, and R4 zones are compliant with that designation. The R15 zone actually gives a different designation for a low density area versus a medium density area. That's why it's listed that way. Our high density residential seems that the highest density that we currently have in the cities is around 20 units per acre. So I'm suggesting that general range be 14 to 22. And the MPC zone is really the only one that's really compliant with that designation. I sincerely think that if there's going to be a place for the MPC zone in the future, that's well and good. But there should be some discussion about how these other zones, the R2, R3, and R4 could be blended into that. Then, so those are the basic residential ones. I was going to discuss the Hillside Residential separately. Any questions about those descriptions about residential?
No. Anybody? Nope, we're good, move on.
Okay, Hillside Residential. Some of you are aware that the city is considering the establishment of a hillside protection zone, or not the zone, but a sensitive lands overlay that would further refine the standards that are in our hillside protection zones. And what I've tried to do is recognize that as part of the development that occurs up on that hillside, that there are some significant aspects of this that first and foremost relate to the geology, hydrology, the physical science part of the development that occurs up there. But there's also a relationship to the wonderful public lands that are adjacent to the hillside areas, and providing access to those lands. You all have been talking about that. I wanted to emphasize that. Those things should also be incorporated into those design areas. The city was very far-reaching some years ago. I think it was 2004 or 5 when they actually conducted a hillside study, and it has proved very beneficial in our reviews of projects up in that neighborhood. Any other thoughts about that?
No questions? thoughts? I personally like the variety of things you've interjected into that, which, you know, as possibilities, which I think makes it come alive more than just something that sits there and looks like it's looked for centuries.
Right. So let's move on to talking about the commercial zoning that we have in the city. So we have basically we have two commercial zones. We have a manufacturing zone, and our R4 zone currently allows for professional offices. That's one of the things that we're recommending is that the professional offices be taken out of the R4 zones, and that those properties that have professional offices, they be given a commercial designation. But so as part of this, there's some descriptions there. We have neighbor-oriented commercial, and to be honest with you, we really don't have any neighborhood-oriented commercial. What we have is more of the term that's in the plan calls it general commercial. The new zone that we've created or is called community commercial, and it really is the most functional of all of the commercial zones that we have. The neighborhood commercial zone is really a placeholder, and I've received a lot of, I'll use the term resistance, but that doesn't mean to be, it's not meant to be argumentative in any sense. But at some point in time, my personal belief is that there should be a place for some neighborhood commercial that is scattered throughout the city and not require everybody to go shopping or go whatever in the outside of along Washington and along 2600. So as I say, it's a placeholder. There's also the offices, and basically we are creating in this new ordinance. One of the most significant things is we're taking a hard look at the various uses that are recommended within the ordinance and bringing those up to date. And any questions about the commercial?
Yeah, I have one. It's Julie.
Sure.
So you were talking about, you think that in the future that there should be little shopping areas throughout the city. Why? Well, I mean, you kind of explained it, but why do we need that? I mean, it's not like people have to drive a long distance to come downtown. And most people, I don't think, care that they have to drive somewhere. So why do you think that would be beneficial to our city? I guess my question.
Well, a number of reasons. First of all, having to drive to the extent, I mean, I've driven up on the hill and sometimes it's a half hour just to get to downtown. It just seems like it makes sense to be able to have the convenience of being able to shop for neighborhood things in close proximity to where you live. And it's just a choice.
Yeah.
Hey, Rob, this is Ryan.
Yes.
An example, if I'm understanding correct, would be similar to the straw market in Pleasant View. That's unique to Pleasant View, and I don't think you'll ever find. I mean, it feeds school kids during lunch and breakfast too, but it's just a small little convenience store that's locally owned. That would be my, if I'm understanding neighborhood commercial, that would be my interpretation. And I could see something like that working up on the hill, but I'm not gonna raise that up.
Yeah. Well, you know, and go ahead, Rob. Please.
No, that's fine. It's strictly a choice. I know that when we've raised that issue as something that should be considered, for example, of the North Hills project, that we got a very wide-ranging set of opinions.
Well, you know, and Rob, you know, taking a step back and looking at the development of the city, when Skyline Drive is finished, that's gonna be a big exit for a lot of folks, and we're gonna have to have something there that's kind of a neighborhood, you know, quasi 7-Eleven or K, you know, whatever they call those things, you know, to serve that area, because frankly, a lot of those people are not gonna come down through the bottleneck here at 2700, you know, to get where they're going. And I think having it there is fine. If there's a need for it, somebody will fill the need, and I'm glad that we have it as a placeholder, because I can see some potential there.
So in our new ordinances, they're going, we currently have 4 commercial zones, and we are going to reduce those down to 2. We'll retain our manufacturing zone. And so it'll be a much more simplified and organized management of the uses that are contained within our commercial zones for the city. So any other thoughts about commercial?
So what are the 2 divisions that are going to replace the ones we have?
So
General commercial.
it'll be community commercial and neighborhood commercial.
What's the difference? Sorry.
Well,
Community and neighbor.
Well, community commercial is the standard uses that you see along Washington today. And the neighborhood commercial would be something similar to what Councilman Barker just described.
All right, okay.
All right, thank you.
You know, I wonder why would you use community commercial? To me, part of the community, part of those things we're talking about that are a little larger, people from other communities come and use. It's not just our community commercial. Why would you use community commercial instead of general commercial? That, you know, not to get in a picky, you know, the discussion over.
I don't think a lot of people come to North Ogden outside of North Ogden unless they're coming for a reason. I mean, like.
Yeah, they're coming to,
but I
they're
mean,
coming to shop at Lee's, they're coming to go to
I think Plains,
Birds.
yeah.
No.
I don't think we have a lot of people driving.
not long distances, but certainly out of the North Ogden, outside the North Ogden area. I can never go to Smith's or Lee's without seeing people that I know from far west or Harrisville or Plain City, you know, that aren't in our store. And so that's just a little technology thing that, you know, yeah, go ahead. You can wipe that out. What you name it doesn't matter.
So the next level up from community commercial is actually regional commercial. So, you know, like downtown Ogden and what have you, that they are a regional commercial center.
Okay.
It's strictly a terminology. Nobody's wedded to any of these things necessarily. So the next one then is a description of mixed use, and we have several things that relate to those descriptions. So mixed use obviously can occur in a couple of different ways. One can be a project-centric mixed use, wherein the project itself has both commercial and residential aspects to it. In other instances, already we have along Washington Boulevard, along 27th and what have you, 2700, we do have a standalone projects that have that mixture of commercial and residential uses. So the question there is, how do you blend those things together? This is an attempt to provide for the relationship of how those things can function together. So again, there'll be a big discussion with the Planning Commission and Council about the future of that MPC zone. Should we retain it? Should we modify it? Should we do something with these other zones? Currently, is the only zone that we really have that is truly a mixed use zone. So that's the description that I provided for you.
Thank you.
So we have both Main
Questions?
Street commercial, that's a further description there. And then we have mid-box commercial. And on our general plan map, it shows the southwest corner where the, what's the credit union on the southwest corner of 2600 and just north of Walgreens.
Yeah, that's America First.
America First?
Yeah, American First. So you have that big property that's in there. The general plan today calls for that area to be reserved for mid-box commercial, and then there's a description of it. A lot of course, will depend upon being able to attract that type of development activity relative to that. And there's
Ron,
yeah.
I have a question. What's the difference between mid-box commercial and big box commercial?
It's generally the size. So you're, as described, 40 to 80,000 square feet of, whereas some of these malls and what have you, they're over 1 million square feet. So
I see, okay. See, by big box, I was thinking Home Depot or Target or something like that. Would be a pretty big box investment. But okay, thanks.
I think there was a recognition, there's a recognition that given the amount of buying power that the city currently has, that it would probably be pretty unlikely to attract a Lowe's or a Home Depot or those kinds of big box stores.
Yeah. What would Michael's be considered?
I think that is definitely,
Okay.
that would be a mid box.
There we go, good, okay. But I don't want one of those because Linda would never have any money left over in the budget.
Well, there's Hobby
You don't want
Lobby,
Mike-
you know, there's a number of different ones out there.
Yeah, I don't want to get those around. No. Go ahead, sorry.
Then we have this description
Okay.
about master plan communities. And I don't remember if we really have a designation on the map for that. I think we have it's sort of interspersed with our mixed commercial, downtown mixed commercial, et cetera. So that's kind of the mix of those things, and being able to identify the relationship of the mix of uses within the downtown, the relationship between commercial manufacturing and residential, the mix that we currently have. Do we want to promote that, et cetera? Those are some of the policy questions.
Okey-doke.
The last
other
two
questions?
are pretty simple. The one's dealing with parks and also our civic zone or civic uses. And I think you're aware of the fact that the city council adopted a civic zone this past year. And we are in the process of rezoning all of the city-owned properties to this civic zone. And the reason for that is that the residential zones where most of these properties reside, the standards really don't line up very well with the functionality of these various civic uses. For example, our public works building. So that's something that we'll be.
Okay.
So what my suggestion is, take some time to digest some of this, reflect on how this may blend into not only the draft map that you all came up with, but also the existing map and whether or not it could service and whether or not there needs to be the breadth of changes, whether or not with a few tweaks that existing map may be able to be functional, or if you need to to move on to do something a little more dramatic. So you got a lot of work ahead of you.
Okay. Yeah, well, we appreciate your time and efforts on behalf of our community, Rob. Are you officially retired? Or are you gonna continue as a consultant on some of this, or what, how should we address you from here on out?
How about Rob?
There you go.
I've committed to work
You
on,
got
I've committed to work on 2 projects, the sensitive lands overlay. Hopefully the council they will be seeing that here the first week in May or second week in May. And then this land use code, I've committed to provide a little bit of a transition relative to those 2 projects. And who knows where it goes from there.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. I for one appreciate your contributions to our community, and I'm glad that you ended up your career in a nice, positive place like North Ogden.
I've loved this place. I really do. And the people that I've had the privilege of working with have been really outstanding.
Thanks so much. Okay, we'll move on to John, if that's okay with everybody. John, let's hear about general plan goals and committee deadlines.
Okay, I'm gonna slide over so I can be near a microphone. I guess they're all on, so I could have been over there too. So there's really 2 things that this group is focused on. One of them, the group has done before, which is the moderate income housing plan. This is an update, which is what we did the first year. Last year, we did the report that you all saw that kind of where we were. With Scott Hess coming line to fill in for Rob, he will take the laboring ore of that so that it's being done with a little more technical background than in the past. And then the second one is just the general plan in general. The general plan in general. Generally the general plan, general statements. But there's obviously a lot of components, but the culmination of that is a final general plan, which I think we talked about as a goal for this year as well. The main one that's been focused on right now is the zoning map. And with that, the concept of vesting the zoning map, not vesting the zoning map, or even just heightening the strength of the zoning map so that residents have an expectation of what's coming in the future. And then the second component to that is everything else. And some of that is going to require just going through the general plan and looking at what needs to change, what shouldn't change. There might even just be a reorganization. I know Julie and I have had a conversation or 2 about some of the language that it's not 100% clear what the language was intended to be. Kind of felt like it was boilerplate plan. And so just making sure that it's matching exactly what the city wants. Specifically, if I remember right, Julia, the language said something about the urban development on natural lands, or the impact of urban development on natural lands. And it could be read to mean actually constructing on natural lands, or if you build next to them, how does it impact them? And so it's something this group can talk about, is what's the goals with the natural resource that we have, which is the hillside and trail system. That second more general stuff is going to be probably a lot of out of committee work, people taking a section. Julie's got
We need to make it a lot thinner.
Yeah, that's crazy.
An eighth of that. Well, I love that the residents can open it and look at,
No, I mean, half of it is just surveys.
I think
Yeah.
the consultants that we had help us with it were paid by the page.
there's
So-
appendix A, B, M.
Well, and I think you're right. I think some of those appendices don't carry the same weight as they did before, like the surveys. Although we'll obviously keep the surveys and have
Yeah,
them
I
on.
mean, you can have them online, but I think in general, if people just go
It's
to
just
this
hard
book,
to
it's hard to
navigate.
navigate.
And in fact, what it almost might be that the goal is essentially reorganizing the document and really narrowing down the executive summary. so that it's a 5-page, or maybe it's a 10-page, but something that residents can show up and say, okay, what's the transportation plan? What's the land use plan? What's the moderate income housing plan? And if I want more information, where do I go to find it?
Exactly.
And that, you know, that'll be up to the group. No one that I'm aware of that the city has any strong opinions about how it needs to be organized. The only things we have to have are the things the state mandates,
Yeah.
which is future land use, transportation, moderate income housing.
Yeah.
So, and, you know, obviously there's a big section on the history, which tells a lot about North Ogden. That could be moved to an appendix. That could be a supplementary report.
Page on the website, history.
Mhm. And so anyways, I know it doesn't, it's more complicated than just those two goals, but in theory, those are the real goals for this year and moderate income housing, this group will be looking at those roughly, I think, 8 or 9 items that we identified, and probably whittling the list down a little bit and focusing on what are the 6, because some of them are just, there's so much that we just said, well, let's try it. And because there's so many, no one's tried it.
Yeah, I would love to come up with the 6 and then even come up with some even more specified plans with those 6, so that, I mean, because right now housing is out of weights.
Yeah, and one of the
Like,
things, and John or Josh could attest to this, is housing is going to cost what it's going to cost. And there are things the city can do to help make it cheaper. And it's usually tied to more efficient development, not necessarily always more units, but even if the development process can be sped up, then the units become cheaper. North Ogden will always be more expensive than Ogden, at least for the foreseeable future. Ogden, in a lot of ways, has some experience like the avenues, right, where it's flipping, where some of those old homes and those old neighbors and the character are becoming appealing and values are going up. But in general, North Ogden is always going to be not more desirable, but have things that attract certain groups.
And Ogden's doing a great job on supplying apartments. They are building on every little.
Apartments are going everywhere, townhomes are going
Yeah, I
everywhere,
mean,
and
there's-
houses are going everywhere.
There's an easy answer of like, well, we'll just do this, and I think that there's so many alternatives, so that
We can just let Ogden
and
do
that's,
that.
again, I pulled up this from Brandon, there's some that I think are really awesome in here. Cottage Court, I really think is awesome, the small unit duplex, 6plex.
Yeah. And I think, and so those are kind of things
Yeah.
that there's, I mean, that might be an emphasis that isn't currently in the plan, is let's talk about housing. And let's talk about how we're gonna inject the specialized housing. I mean, there's nowhere in Weber County that I'm aware of that has a cottage court. There probably is, I'm sure Brandon found one in Ogden,
Yeah.
but they're in Salt Lake quite a bit, and they're fun
They
little spots.
also,
They're cool.
I think they also kind of really fit with our idea of clustering.
Right. Yeah.
Taking, because that isn't so intrusive into, like yesterday, we were concerned about townhomes, and I get that, I'm looking at these, and he's got a picture of this duplex. I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, he's got units in each one of those buildings. But if he did cottage clusters, lots of open land, little cottage clusters, on neighborhood townhomes, it's gotta be a spot.
Yeah,
Because we do actually have little places in the city, kind of off of Washington Boulevard as you go up, that are duplexes that you think are homes.
Mhm.
Yeah, they
So,
fit right in,
yeah,
I think there's,
I've been in those and it's like, oh, I thought these were homes.
and
well, that's what I was
Well,
looking
and-
at, just the map from yesterday, the presentation, and I'm like, I get that this many, I mean, it's just not zoned for that, so
Yeah.
let's figure out a way to still give that without putting that many, there's just ways to do it, we're just doing the same old. I'm thinking because we pick a different looking apartment, it's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, agree. And one of the overriding concerns I think that plays into this is creating larger clusters that have a sense of neighborhood. So that people are, interact with each other as they're coming and going, create that sense of neighborhood so you don't end up with ghettos. Because these kinds of things can turn into ghettos really easily if they're not constructed to facilitate that sense of neighborhood. And I think as we talk about cluster development down the road or any future development, that really ought to be a concern that's built into the master plan. Because communities that do that in terms of violence, vandalism, so on and so forth,
Yeah,
that
I
goes
mean,
way down.
yeah, I get what you're saying, and I think what I'm looking at is on smaller, maybe a smaller scale ways to fit housing options. Because right now, we're putting it all in one area, and I think there's ways to inject housing options and costs
No, I
into other
agree.
areas, yeah. But like Village of Providence point to me is that.
Yeah.
We've made a separate. And I'm concerned that that's what's gonna happen. at
Well, see,
Village of Point,
I don't really think that's much of a neighborhood.
No,
I think the
exactly,
way
but
it's
I
put
think
together.
That's where I have huge concerns over master plan community. I just don't know that North Ogden,
I don't think that fits for us anymore.
I
The
don't
time
know
for that's
where.
come and gone.
We have a very specific area where commercial
Mhm.
sits.
Yeah.
And I mean, neighborhood ideas,
Yeah.
so many
Well, and
things that I
we've
see
got-
are really cool and fun, but
Yeah.
North Ogden's backed into a corner of mountains and there's
Okay.
a reality to what this,
Right.
do you know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
it's like, if we're planning around what looks cool and what we think sound, but doesn't fit North Ogden,
Right.
we're gonna end up with another village.
What- but the reality
But
is-
it's like,
Yeah.
that's,
But Steph, the reality is, given the nature of the geography, North Ogden can either be an elbow or an armpit. And I think what we do, the way we lay it out, is gonna make the difference.
what? I get that, I'm not saying like,
And-
I'm just saying simply to understand that.
See, when I'm talking sense of neighborhood, look at what they put up to replace the D school in Ogden. That was a few acres, that is a neighborhood. Those
Yes,
folks
I
get
know,
together and
I-
have, so. it doesn't-
Grant,
it doesn't
Grant,
have
I'm
to
not,
be a big
I
deal.
think that's a great idea. I'm saying neighborhoods are good. I was talking about commercial laying out. Let's just make sure that we're,
Yeah.
talking about.
No, I think we're on the same page there, but I must have misunderstood because I thought you were talking about the only place that's come is on a larger scale and no, it comes.
No,
in
master,
products.
no, I'm saying, I was saying specifically master plan
Yeah,
community.
that's
That's
the largest
exactly.
iteration. And I don't
Yeah, I
think it fits
can't,
North Ogden.
and so I don't know where that would go. Like, it's clearly been,
Well, if Marriott bought more land on the hillside, that could become a
I
master
think
plan
that
community.
that's-
That's about the only place we have.
yeah,
that-
and I
that
think
has the
that's why it
size to
keeps
do it.
being added.
Yeah, I think that's the only, I think that's the only place we have where, unless partners get together and sell all their farmland and so on. Master plan.
I just, and what I'm saying is, when you come in, there's one way in and one way out, and so I think we want to be really careful. I don't think that there's enough flow through and
Yeah.
movement that we need to separate. I think our city works really well together, and it's not gonna grow bigger this way, it's not gonna grow bigger, this is kind of what we've got, and so I just say, I think it's a disservice to start to try to separate it all when we have such a really great area that's a town center that still has so much potential and growth
No, I totally
there
agree
to
with that.
service.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, that's-
My sense, when I say sense of neighborhood, is a sense where people
I
know
get-
each other and get together.
Yeah, no, I get that
cul-de-sac kind of
100%. I
thing. So we're
think
there.
that makes absolute sense.
So we're there.
And I was agreeing with you
Yeah.
that I think it's dangerous to separate, like, we don't want to do that. We want to make, and, I was gonna say that, like, I would hate to see Patriot Point become its own little functioning city within North Ogden.
I
would
wish
like
we
to
would have had
see-
Steph on board before that happened, because my fear is
that is gonna be what you're talking about, is stone, little
Yeah.
isolated community, not participate, not tied into the nation community, and frankly designed so it's not much of a sense of community either. It's a bunch of, it's a bunch of living spaces tacked together.
And I have a concern about moderate income housing. The idea being, well, we'll just make this area apartments and make them their own little, and I don't think that helps anyone. I'm not saying you, I'm just,
No, I totally agree with you.
yeah.
On that, you know.
So I'd love to come up with some ideas where we can offer different housing, you know, because
Okay.
I used to think behind my house, I would want, you know, a house in the yard, but really, I don't want I just don't want some big apartment building blocking off my view, lots of traffic.
Right.
That can look like a lot of different things
Right.
and still be really comfortable to me. And I think it'd be great to incorporate families that would have the option of an apartment down west, but now have some options that put them in different housing areas.
Okay.
I don't like breaking it up and saying, you know,
Right, like, and I think we're on the same page.
yeah, so I'd like us to keep that in mind, to talk about London.
Right.
We could just take a
John, do you
little
have more to
turn.
cover, or have we covered yours?
No, that's good. That's what I have.
Yeah, so kind of in summary, we have get the general plan done, organize it maybe a little bit differently, certainly reduce the size of it to make it more useful and more accessible. In that includes some of the philosophy, but not all of that, et cetera. And then moderate housing issues that we have to have done by the end of the year, right? The moderate income report.
Yeah.
Okay, if that's okay, let's move to discussion on sensitive land and cluster development. And we're kind of on that already. So if you want to turn your hand out, I'll just show you some of the things that I brought in, if that's okay. This basically takes the categories where you can put in place mixed use planning in the sense that they have overlay zones applied to them. And the overlay zone that you can apply can within a particular area allow for something kind of exceptional. Planned unit developments. These are some examples of planned unit developments that basically look a lot like Lakeview Heights, et cetera, et cetera. There were some others that I couldn't get size to put on here, to make any sense. But the one on the lower left-hand corner is really a very high-density housing project that is enclosed with a big that has a big courtyard, and frankly creates a real attractive community that's high density. And the size of those particular units is such that they're low income, they're small, they're starter homes, kind of communities. One thing I found in looking through is the concept of mixing starters with older people. Because both of them are after low-cost housing to a great extent. But the interaction that creates in the community between the elderly citizens and the kids really can create a bonding kind of thing. And there were a couple examples that I read, but I couldn't find any pictures of it, where that became one of the goals of the development, was that we're going to have old folks and young folks get together and create an ambiance that facilitates the big brother, the mentor, the grandpa, grandma kind of association on a greater scale. And when I talk about creating that sense of neighborhood, that's the kind of thing I'm after. I'm really referring to things where people are getting closer together in the way that their living quarters are designed really makes that happen. And the things that come out of that, there are a couple pockets in Ogden City. One's the old D school pocket. There's one just off of Harrison. I don't know what school that used to be, but basically that's just an extended cul-de-sac, and that area works really well. I know because Linda and I or service missionaries that cover that, you know, and the sense of community that those 40 homes have developed is just incredible. And there's real ownership. Nobody's going to come in there and hurt somebody else's property. You know, because they look out for each other, they care for each other, they help each other. And that's the kind of sense of neighborhood and community I would really like to see us look at. And if cluster developments could come in with that kind of an ambiance and picture in mind, boy, I would be real excited to say, let's increase the density of that. You
So
know?
do you see like this, like, on our map, outside, like up in these areas?
No, well, as we
Just like-
place the older homes and so on, it would be there, and I don't want to place them right now because,
Well, I'm just saying, like, so I can see these all in here, like behind Maverick
right,
and along Washington where those apartments are, something, you
Well,
know, upgraded to this would be really cool and fit that idea. I'm trying to imagine it up in here. I like, you know, I mean, I get the sense of neighborhood.
Mhm. No, I think there's some places where we could put it, you know, and I don't, all I'm saying is that let's try to look for places where we can do an overlay zone that really encourages that. Because I think there are some places in the city we can't, and I don't want to find them tonight.
No, I know, but
Okay. Yeah.
is this, would this overlay zone conflict or just be a separate one from what we were
Right.
talking about with clustering?
Yeah. No, clustering and overlay zones. you know,
Well, the
really-
clustering would almost be its own overlay zone, right?
Right.
Because we would say,
Right,
so that's what I'm saying, this would be in addition to that is
Right.
what you're thinking.
Right, yeah, you know,
Okay.
and so what it would do is to take the residential zone, for example, that we're looking for residential development and create, you know, within that, a couple places where we'd like to see overlay zones that enhances sense of neighborhood. The other thing that you can do with this, and one of the, let's see, I'll go back to the fact is all the planned unit developments require some level of open space. They did it in the downtown, and that unit I'm talking about by creating a certain thing, and they have a central plaza that really acts as a little mini community center that people get into and do things.
I think we have that requirement already in our NPC zone, right? And so like
Yeah.
Village of Providence Point, they'll all have that, but that again is somewhat creating their own little.
Well, and what you can do at this point in time, I think there's probably been a lot of flexibility given, you know,
Yeah.
and people say this is what it is, but it's not really. You know, what it is a bunch of apartments jammed together, get as many people in as possible, you know, on those. There's some examples of this on you know, on page 2, and some ways, when you were talking about overlays over overlays, this
Yeah.
chart, you know, this chart is like taking it to the real extreme, you know, and I would think we'd never go to anything that level in our community. The mixed use overlay zone, it is where you can take, and this gets at a little bit maybe what Councilman Barker was referring to when he said, well, you know, and also Rob, when they were talking about little neighborhood market kinds of things, you know, and you could create within a residential zone, if somebody came in with a really good plan and so on, you could basically create just for that establishment, you know, an overlay zone. There are achieved cohabitation of uses while ensuring the negative impacts on residents are minimized. You know, and it talks about the diminished need for motorized travel, you know, to do some things, passages, sidewalks, etc. Those are some of the things that show up here. Some of these, you know, are there's some other examples of that. Most of them are larger. And what we have. I'm looking for the Wisconsin page. I think it's
That's
about
the
3
front.
pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right. One of the creative uses of this this, you know, and when we're talking about these target overlays,
Thanks for welcoming me.
when we talk about these target overlays, the figure one is well head prevention. And these are all over this.
Oh, okay.
And what
Is
they've
there any
done
access
is
to
basically
recording from last
create. with
Was it
each of the
recorded, the
municipal
council
zones,
meeting?
Additional
Yeah.
requirements to protect the wells from contamination. And so you have like an R4 area, but within that R4 area, they have pockets that are actually almost wilderness, you know, that are maintained, that they put together in that way. So we have capacity to do that. And the way it might refer to North Ogden is a few places where we have open streams, you know, or frankly, wildlife trails.
I like that idea, like an overlay zone, like
Oh,
a
yes.
water protection overlay
Right,
zone.
yeah, right in there, and you can develop in there if you want to, but this is a piece of that, what that development's gotta be. You know, otherwise it's just gonna be the regular R4 or whatever. But Wisconsin, you know, Green Bay's bigger than we would be, but you know, they have some creative ideas there. And Oshkosh, you know, which runs right by the freeway runs right through it. You know, they've had some problems with things that were happening there, and they get overlay zones to protect against that. So my sense from this is, as a committee, I'd like to invite this out to the different units, and this was Steph's idea, to the different sections of the town that we've identified, and then have subcommittees identify within each of those areas some kind of an overlay if we think it fits, you know, into that particular area. And so if, for example, in the area that this gentleman is talking about, you know, if there's enough acreage there, we may want to create an overlay zone there that enhances, you know, kind of the downtown and the other concepts we want. In which case we give them opportunity to do more than just build houses on lots, but do something really creative with it. And, you know, I think we can do that, you know, give the council the option to do that. But go to them with a list of suggested overlay units.
I thought we were just more clustering.
Well, cluster.
I mean,
Overlay.
like an overlay cluster, and I'm not saying that you're bad.
No,
I
let
just-
me
I
clarify.
differ.
Hold on, let me clarify, Steph. An overlay unit includes cluster, usually.
No, I understand that, but
Okay.
when you were saying, we could give him some really fun creative ideas. I get that. I missed that part of our discussion. I thought we just said we would work on zones with clustering to go with each zone.
Well, but my sense is, within zones, we can create areas that are potential overlay areas, for example, around the water features and so
Yeah,
on
I
and
get
so
that.
forth, that basically say, okay, the way this is zoned, you could put this many houses in, but if you want to be creative and preserve and allow public access to the water, then we're going to increase the density. And you can do something in addition, to that. It's not going to be the regular density kind of thing we're talking
Yeah,
about.
and I think that's the
Yeah.
clustering general.
Yeah, it's
So-
clustering, but clustering for kind of a purpose,
Yeah,
and they can, other developers have come in with ideas and so on, but there's some areas I think we got to target for that approach in our master plan.
well, I mean, I like how yesterday we had said, well, so I can,
Yeah, why don't we go over that?
you've got it laid out, and so then we've all kind of been intrigued by clustering, things we think that maybe makes some sense. It's not something we all completely understand yet, we need to do a little work on it. But I'm gonna redraw this map out, because we've gone through and basically marked off, where we want low density, and we've got the zones. So what we'd like to present to the committee next month, and then we'll have them approve it,
To
and
take
then
to
we'll,
city,
yeah, and then to
Planning
take to the
committee.
city. is the map drawn out, and we'll have it marked out as low density, and within that low density, we've identified the zones that we see as low density, so it's really simple and easy for you guys, to follow. And then, we'd like to let the council know we're working on a possible cluster overlay for each zone, so as developers come and want rezoning, that would be some way for them, if they want higher density on on an area that's zoned for low density, that might be an option that is workable, where they can do a cluster and get higher density, but would be leaving more green space.
Right, yeah, in that, on that with the overlay, we have some requirements about percentage of open space and the whole concept of developing, setting it up so people get to know each other and develop relationships, so on and so forth. And if a developer comes in and says, well, I want to put 50 homes where I could only put 12, but I'm going to do this, there's going to be this much open space and these kind of amenities and so on.
And see, I don't know that amenities go with it. That's
Well,
where I
I
get confused. I'm like, I don't really want to start adding amenities to neighborhoods.
Well, no, it's up to the developer to come in with something that they approve, but.
Yeah, and that, I guess in my head, that makes it something else than just housing.
Well,
That
no,
makes
some of these overlay units require open space and specific amenities.
Well, but I understand that these do.
Yeah.
I'm saying with ours, as discussing it, like that to me takes it a little bit different than residential, though, when we're requiring amenities for homes in a small area.
Okay.
And so that, I'm just saying that's a discussion, that's new that I'm hearing from you, so I'm just
Yeah,
saying
no,
that's a discussion that will.
it's a different.
I know that
it's a different
we
approach.
have talked about the clustering where it's like,
Mhm.
okay, so you've got low density, which is.
There it
Is, 2.6 units per acre, and you've got this many acres.
Mhm.
How did it work? But you still get,
So how clustering works, in the little reading that I've done, is basically you have an acreage.
Mhm.
And Smithfield is actually starting to do this. This is where we kind of first heard about it from Dan. Is that Smithfield, I don't know if you've been up there lately, but it's not the little community that I remember. It's like, wait, isn't that Smithfield implement somewhere along this road? I could have sworn there was,
Yeah.
but there were big fields with it. So what they do is they understand the keeping of community, but they also understand the keeping of the openness that community likes, the ability to say, I feel like I live in a bedroom society community, even though I don't. And so then the city council came up with well, planning commission and everybody decided that certain percentage would be open space.
Mhm.
And then the rest of it would allow them to build more homes, but not like apartments or anything like that. It's kind of like take it up to like an R18 zone, or the R5, where you can have a few more homes, but it doesn't feel like it's intense because you still got lots of green space.
It's almost,
Yeah.
it's similar instead of traditional development where every home is built on its own lot.
Yeah,
You have the big parcel, and the
Yes.
homes are built,
yes,
A much
Yeah.
smaller lots.
but not, well, it's not like they're on their own lot. They're
yeah,
just built
I think,
yeah,
together.
as far as I understand it, is you have
Yeah,
this
exactly.
much acreage, and under that zoning, you're allowed so many
Right.
units.
Yeah.
But we're not gonna make you do, you still only get that many
Yeah.
units.
Right.
But you don't have to put them on that. You can-
Exactly,
You
yeah,
can cluster
exactly.
that many units together
yeah,
to make a higher density housing at a different, at a better cost or whatever,
Well, yeah,
and still allowing, but I guess that's
but,
kind of.
but another application of that is not only the same number of units, but actually you can increase the number of units in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Because of this, so this really puts a high density pocket in, in the middle of the residential area, but it's unique and attractive, and there are some things that other people who live in that, R4 area can access.
Yes.
you know. Great concept, I think, and boy, I wish we could get some developers out here who would look at that, because I think it would be ideal, you know, to solve all kinds of problems.
But we still need to, because that's a new concept.
Right.
Yeah.
We clearly need to discuss it, because Grant's got different ideas, but it's mostly because we haven't had a chance to really
Well, yeah.
Bring it all
discuss it and bring it together, and so.
And see the power of these concepts, of these overlay zone concepts, cluster and so on and so forth, is you can give people a number of options as suggestions. They can come in with whatever they want.
Yeah,
But basically, we say it's got to have these kind of basic parameters to it, you know, and bring it on, you know. And if you want to take an area that we were looking at quarter acre homes, or half acre homes, or full acre homes, or so on, and put it together, you can put together a cool place in there, but with dense housing, you know, and high level of people living there, but it's gonna look rural, and it's gonna feel rural. It's not gonna attract them to me, but it's gonna enhance the community, you know, unlike Frontier. I'm sorry.
right.
I do not want to see another development. Like anybody
He's
who
just
want to
the
see
one
another
that keeps trying to
development.
wipe the crap off his shoes about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so I think one of my concerns, like as you say it though, one of my concerns is, one of the things in North Ogden though, is that, when we're trying to do housing like that in smaller areas, make it still rural, is sometimes the density is gonna require height, and that is one of my concerns in North Ogden, because we don't have areas big enough to put you know, something that's gonna be taller and have enough land around it to not impact.
Well, we can probably go 2 or 3 stories.
I would say,
Yeah.
and see, 3 would be.
A
that would
lot
be
of
where it
homes in
is.
the community are 3 or 4 stories.
Not up,
Yeah, look up on the hill.
yeah, I'm like, I don't,
Yeah, look up on the hill.
2 stories with the basement.
Yeah, with the basement, yeah, you
is
know.
that the highest? Do you know of any homes that are higher than 3 or 2?
Above ground.
Yeah.
I mean.
Brian's saying no,
Unless they build on the hill.
yeah,
But
but that's not, but that's, I mean, that's
Taking advantage
different
of the
than
slope. That's taking
putting a
advantage, okay.
3 or 4 in the
Right.
middle of a flat area where homes are. So that, you know, that would be something to look at, but I'm just saying, as you're saying, that is my thought of like, okay, that's where we'll have to work it out, and that's where I think these housing that, Brandon brought up, let me show you, so this is in our, and see, this to me doesn't work, this, we've got it, it's just the same old.
Yeah.
That doesn't, I mean, we've got a little bit, that doesn't work great. Small house, so here's the cottage court.
Right.
I like this idea. This makes sense to me, of smaller homes that aren't apartments, that aren't townhomes.
So we could maybe look at, when I look at that, I think about the 55 and older community right behind Lee's.
Yeah.
Because that's
Yeah.
kind of how it.
But those are actually this right here, attached units. And they're just okay. I mean, I like
Yeah.
little individual, I think
Yeah,
it's really
I
unique.
mean,
But
that's kind of the
but yeah, it's
concept.
kind of a mix.
Yeah.
But those do still look so, that's on a, even on a bigger scale than I imagine the cottage.
Yeah.
Like I can see it in my head, but anyway.
No, you're talking
just
about
as
little
options.
cottage courts. You know,
Yeah.
where, you know.
But and
and
so then something like this.
I lived in one. in
Okay,
Hawaii,
so
it was
that
great.
example would most probably be when you're going out 2,700 to Pleasant View and they have that 55 and older and they're individual little
Mhm.
houses.
Mhm.
So they're more like the, you know, they're more like the cottage layout that, you know, that
That's
Yeah.
another one.
See,
That-
you know
well,
what I'm
that's,
talking
yeah,
about?
this is
I think
exactly,
that is.
this
an
one's just
example of
drawn out.
cottages.
But see, I like
Because they're
this,
all
they're
individual.
still pretty big.
Mhm.
Yeah, they are pretty big, but
but these ones
to
look
me-
like they're very, very small. You've got one drive in, the drive would be off the back, so it would fit into a neighborhood depending. This to me fits where John Hanson's doing it, I think he could do like.
Yep.
But I do also think that right now we have a growth that I any kind of multi-house. or, you know.
But explain how we broke the zones up to.
Okay, yeah.
So that he can.
Really
Yeah,
good. I
let's
wanted to
talk
show
about
you
that.
one
So you
other
see
thing
where
I
we're
thought
at.
was kind of interesting that could possibly work in, and not big like this.
No.
These, you
That look
know,
like a house.
Sarah's
Mhm.
working on a project like that.
yeah, I think things like those could fit into North Ogden, and those are ways to really maximize the fill and the
Sure.
things that people, that still incorporate options and
Well,
housing options for people. So I think,
And the beauty of that is that you can put a number of those together in a cottage court layout.
Yeah.
And end up meeting all
And I think-
kinds of. all
yeah,
kinds of
and I
goals,
think we have to
you know?
be, one of the things, and I know you keep talking about community, and I love that, but like, I have a neighborhood that I love. You throw this in my neighborhood, and that just adds more families to my neighborhood.
Right.
So, you know, the cottage court, I would love that to be somewhere where it becomes not its own little neighborhood, but part of the neighborhood that surrounds it. So I'd like to figure out, because that's what I love about North Ogden right now, is there's certainly neighborhoods and, you know, because of the church, just it naturally gives us some boundaries and we all, so, you know, I like the community, but I would love to just build things that become part of the community, they're built in.
Well, and that can certainly be one of the things. But the
Yeah.
reality is your neighbors, with a few people who are pretty close to you. And all this does is crystallize that concept.
Yeah, and I
Because-
certainly see where this works, and so, like I said, okay, so
Well,
this
that'll
is,
take some time. We'll work it
so
out.
this is what we've done to get to the council so that you guys can do zone changes without, I mean, I appreciate that you're being so, you know, we're not doing it until you guys get it to us, I'm like, we've got to get this down.
Yeah.
So we'll present a map that will have it all marked out with low density. So I can tell you, I've got it. So low density, we've got no less than the R10,
The R-
Zoning.
The R10.
so, or the R10, sorry.
R18 is low density too. That's what a lot of our.
So- Well, so I'll tell you, so we've got low density is yellow. R18 is all the white, so we kind of,
Oh, yeah, okay.
so we're not being like, oh, we don't want any, you know, we're trying
Yeah.
to. We're kind of working around what it has and picking some areas, like this is really farmland, this is kind of getting up on the hill a little bit more. And these are R18s. This will be marked out R18, but it will also be marked out as the low density with transferable option.
Mhm.
So we've kind of identified this area as transferable. So we've got this area, I think we actually decided to change to the R2. The higher density.
Mhm.
Right now it is low density, so it's not something, again, we were trying to think future.
It's near a school, it's, you know.
Yeah, and so if this is gonna be higher density right off of Washington, as the city builds out, this is a great area somewhere down the line that it could eventually become something more like what Grant is showing us. As, you know, depending on how things progress, 20 years or whatever. So we've got, so the orange is commercial, just commercial. We have mixed use in here. I think we've decided to put mixed use and high density kind of together with, you know, that we think zoning that would be mixed use or high density in those areas. I don't think any of us are huge fans of the NPC zone, and we think the mixed use needs to have some, but you know, that's not really our call right now.
It needs work.
Some
Yeah.
atmosphere.
This area is where we're questioning.
Okay.
And that is, you know, we talked about it. I think in the future, mixed use, kind of the cottage homes, what Johnny Hanson is presenting, dumbed down a little to a little bit less high density works. But again, right now, I get that developing that in any kind of form like that is scary, because we have Village, we have Patriot Point, and we just don't have the infrastructure to keep up with this.
Right.
But I don't know that that's our call, so I don't know how, you know, if you have any suggestions of how we should handle that.
But our big question right now is if we
clarify the zones that apply to each of those colored areas, will that give the council enough that they can move forward and,
So
yeah, good.
what was, the mayor brought up a good point last night with Johnny. We don't have a lot of commercial coming to the city right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we keep doing these high density developments, our property taxes will go up because like I was running some basic math, 'cause that's all I can do. In his development, he wanted 84 units
Mhm.
at an average of 4 people per unit. That's roughly 350 people in there. Our police ratio is 1 person, 1 officer per 1,000. So that one development would need a third of an officer and it will not support it off property taxes. So we would have to raise our property taxes.
And it will
for
probably
the whole
be
city.
families with school, with children and our
Yeah.
schools are.
Which I'm not saying it's a bad project, but I just thought
See,
the
and
density is way too much.
I like the layout of it. I didn't realize the density was that high because I looked at his pictures of duplexes and I, somewhere in my head, thought each of those buildings was one of those
I thought a
duplexes.
duplexes would have worked better, but 6 or 7 plex, I did not.
When I
Oh,
realized the density
didn't
last
realize.
night, I was texting her, I'm like, okay, and then they were saying
Yeah.
400,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would be the cost.
But-
And I was like,
That's low
now
cost
it's not-
housing.
that is
That's
not-
moderate
now-
income
now
housing.
is just not the time. And so it's kind of frustrating because I'm like, I like that bringing that up. I think that there's some things to work with, but Johnny Hanson isn't that guy that's gonna do that. So
No,
I don't know.
But if, I mean, in that area, if we would say duplexes instead, then I
Yeah.
think you'd get a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah, duplexes at the height.
That's more of
So
a
it's
position
kind of,
than a 7
Yeah, because when I looked at
It
it,
totally
when
is.
you showed me his pictures, that's what I thought they were.
I did too
With
until we
duplexes,
started
and I'm
talking
like,
last night. And then I
Those
was
look
like,
really nice.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but the guy that was here tonight, he just wants to extend the duplexes, keep on going
he
down.
does. And when he
Yeah.
was saying that, saying, well, Johnny Hanson's project, we'll just settle. And I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, no, you're trying to squeeze it in here and call it something that it's not. You've
Yeah.
got massive homes on Loman View with farms.
Yes.
And there is a way to transition and still make it, it's not townhomes and duplexes.
Yeah.
And when Rob Scott says people, they do, because what do we have to go by? Village of Providence Point, that is legitimately the armpit.
Yeah,
So
really.
when you talk about it,
Yeah.
it is the armpit.
And it will become more of an.
It's,
It just will.
it is, and it's really a sad thing, but that to me, when we talk about mixed use.
Yeah.
I think we can't get anything there. That was prime on Washington, and we end up with a 7-Eleven and a car wash.
Yes.
So while the idea of these sound great, I don't want to build them
Yeah.
or think that that's
No.
gonna happen
Yeah.
when we're struggling to get.
not to talk bad, but 7-Eleven and car washes, they generate a lot.
I
of
think
sales.
so too, but what I'm saying though is that doesn't
But
fit.
that's not what, I know,
That doesn't fit the idea of a neighborhood, and that's
No.
where I say being realistic is, it's like, I would have loved to have seen cafes and, but
Yeah.
that's not coming. And just because we want it, it's not making it happen. We've got prime real estate, commercial, and we can't.
Well, and this is kind of where, when we look at property taxes and property tax, it'll come up, yeah, that is true, but in terms of attracting other business, that puts a lot of people right close to the central area where we want to put more commercial development. And the increase in population base helps that, really helps that along. So high density can meet a number of needs
But
for us.
at the same time, I've been in, or listening to these meetings where I think it's Dan that said, commercial's not coming, so we need to do all this as mixed use with townhomes.
Yeah.
If we get rid of our commercial,
We have
have
a
it
hope,
anymore.
yeah,
Right.
we have a hope.
So what comes first, the commercial or the people? It's,
My
We have
guess
to find that.
is-
I
Yeah.
think it's okay, that's okay to say, we have to find the balance, and we're. we
and I
can't-
think we have
can't
a lot
just
of
do
high-density
something-
projects already going.
Yeah,
Exactly,
we can't just
exactly.
do something because, like, we can't, that's not,
But
cities have zones for a reason, so I get that we have to respect property owners, but they also know what their land is
But
zoned
right now, they're
as.
zoned. their property, these ones that we're talking are zoned RE20. They're
Yeah.
half-acre lots.
And that's what I'm saying
And
is that's,
The mayor brought up that point. If we get rid of our half-acre lots, where are they gonna go?
Mhm.
Because
and
people do want half-acre lots.
they do, and they may be not now, but we also, I mean, they do, but right now, we're just in this spot where it's like, maybe it's okay to take a deep breath and not.
Well, you know, and that may be the key case, and part of the decision has to be, do we really want to have a downtown area? And if we
Yeah.
want to have a downtown area, we've got to increase the density around it. We have to,
Why?
because you're not going to get the commercial unless you got the population base that accesses it and puts it to use.
We don't.
And having
We have
quarter acre or
we have
half
a
acre
good
lots.
we have a very good population. I mean, you know, and we have one grocery store. I mean, I know what you're saying, but.
Yeah.
And I think that potentially that could happen, but we just can't, we're not there.
And I don't think we need to build
But I
just,
think,
I don't think we need to build just because we don't have enough houses. You know, and so if we don't have enough houses, then let's very quickly build multi-houses. That's, I don't think that's our job. As, you know, the developer, I think, that his job is to come up with something the city's like that works for that particular city.
Yeah.
But I don't see that happening. These developers are just coming in and saying, you know, I mean, I know Ogden City is struggling with all these apartments that are going up, but guess what? There's nothing the city can do about it because that's how they're zoned. And so
Yeah.
if we want to preserve what we have at this moment, you know, then we need to make sure that the zone that we, you know, we don't just allow these developers to constantly come in and say, but think of it, you know, now you'll have the density. I mean, I hear Johnny Hanson say it all the time, nobody wants a big lot.
Well, that's
Huh?
not true.
That's not true.
yeah,
But that's what
But-
he uses.
they're saying we don't have the option. That,
know,
so that they're selling townhomes because there's no other options.
What I like is, my development meetings with Harrisdale, they have a map in their wall that has their whole city and it's zoned, like in spots, and the developer will come in, so this is what we want, they look. It's not on the map, won't, can we ask for it? You can ask, you won't get it,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and they have every area specifically zoned.
See, and that's what we're trying to
That's
do.
what,
That's
that's
what we're
what-
doing here.
what we're
Yeah.
doing with this does.
And that's what, and I like that, because then it's like, they look at it, well, you can ask, but you won't get it.
so it sounds
Yeah,
like
yeah.
our answer for here right now
Is to
is to stay at RE20.
yeah.
Or,
I mean, I know what you're
Yeah,
saying,
yeah,
Maybe
yeah, no,
all
no, no,
one
no,
eight
and
or
I
a-
understand that.
well,
but it,
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to duplexes, and that's R2.
okay, well then maybe.
But, I mean,
maybe
it's got
we
a
find
transition,
something
but it's not R2 all the way.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
gotta have if you're doing a transition, that means you're transitioning from commercial. to
And I
something
think
that's
that,
something
yeah,
that's
I
not.
think that's where we're kind of losing it in our city, is I don't know that we're doing those transfers
No,
good. You know,
Yeah.
it's, you know, because we don't,
but I mean, this area after it, I think that we can take that block
so I think,
of where Johnny Hanson
See, I think,
is.
I think that's a great area for us to put an overlay zone in and a target and say, if you want to build here, this is what we want it to look like. And we'll think about changing the density. If you want to put something in that meets this kind of criteria, then we'll look at changing the density.
Yeah, I get, but I think what we're saying is he wants to do it right now, and right now the city can't
No,
sustain it, so we have to come up with something
Yeah.
that accommodates where our city is
so then we
now.
leave it as maybe R110 and up. You know,
Mm-hmm.
anything R110 and above in that particular area, because, you know, it's a lower density. It's gonna be in that area, usually single family homes,
Mhm.
so you're not gonna have the influx that's going to hurt our police department,
Mhm.
you know?
And
And-
maybe when you guys, like, you can talk to and say, this is something that we talked about fitting here.
Yeah,
If you wanna show it to Johnny and say, look, see
Mhm.
what you can do here, this is an option
Yeah.
of higher density, we may look at.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go, yeah. Yeah,
But,
see,
but what you're presenting to us, we cannot,
Yeah.
we just.
no, absolutely, because that's just like everything else that's gone up and it has all the problems of
Yeah.
everything else.
And
that's
so
gone
that's where I get concerned when you say we need the higher density to bring in the commercial. I'm like, well, I don't want to just say that in hopes that it will cover, because right now we're so behind the eight ball on infrastructure that's a scary thing.
Well,
Until we're comfortable, and we can accommodate the needs of the homes already being built, I just don't think that's something to.
Well, and you know, I look at what commercial we've got, and obviously people are happy with it. They're not coming to the city council constantly saying, we need more of this, we need more of that. I think most people are content with what we've got right now, and we are able to take care of what this city needs.
Well, and I
And
think
that's
of
what's
like
important.
that little strip mall, that's almost like a little, that could hold tons of little
Yeah.
shops, that's right, and they
Yeah.
can't keep the dang business in there.
No, and that's.
I mean,
that's-
it's Check
that's-
City, you know, they had the check cashing for a while, I
Yeah.
mean, they can't keep a
You
business
know,
in there for a
and I
year.
think, you know, they talk about, I have a real hard time with commercial up above. And I understand what you said about strong market, but if you think about Pleasant View, that is the only commercial that Pleasant View has. So, and it's centered within the city.
Mhm.
What we're talking about is now putting more stuff up above and over here and
It
over
would just
there.
be a convenience
No, I don't
store.
think anybody's talking about doing that
No.
now.
Well,
Yeah,
I know
but
Randy Marriott does,
looking,
you know, that's what
looking
he
to
wants,
this,
but.
looking to the.
But that's
vision
what I'm
of the
saying, is in
future.
Pleasant View,
Yeah.
the strong market, yeah, it's great. But it fits the purpose, that's basically their commercial strip. That's all they worry about, other than their
I was
storage
like,
units.
oh, you guys are still here.
No, maybe you don't like, we're just checking.
Well, you know,
I-
Guys, are you losing focus there?
Yeah.
Hey, no, actually, we're not. I think we're having a very productive conversation.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, but actually. I
We're
think-
actually, yeah, that's me.
Oh,
Yeah,
We're
we appreciate you checking in with us, Mayor.
no, we're fixing all the problems in North
I've
Oxford.
been listening for a while.
What do
I'm
you
listening
think?
in.
Are we doing okay?
Do correctly.
Yeah, no, you know, it's,
You need to let us know when the mayor jumps on.
yeah.
That's funny.
He's always listening.
I know.
I believe that.
But I think what we've done here is what the city council is looking
Right.
at, right? With
Yeah,
the
it is.
zoning.
Yeah.
This takes care of it immediately. We're gonna come back, amend the general plan and create some other options in there that allow folks to come in with something that meets our criteria to do something different within those zones. And I think that's, I think that's fair. But we're not there yet. We don't have, as you can see between this Steph and I, we don't have a consensus at this point on what those would look like.
But I think.
But
that-
this gives you something. to
Yeah,
go.
and I think
And we'll
we
have that ready
agree
by
on the
June.
discussion and moving forward, and we'll find it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we haven't had that. So I will detail this out based on what we came up with yesterday and the zones that we've got down, and I'll get that to you. In fact, before our next general
Committee
plan
meeting,
GPAC meeting,
Yeah.
so that you can say,
Mhm.
these areas concern me,
Yeah.
and we can go from there.
When is our next meeting scheduled? Joyce?
The end of May, and so it'll be just in time to approve it and give it to.
What day?
Iowa State
What
GPAC.
day is
It is
Because I could not
the
remember. what it all meant.
26th,
May the
May
26th?
26th, 26th.
So
Okay,
that'll
May
give
26th,
give
okay.
us a chance for
Yeah.
the committee to approve it,
Yeah.
and then get it to Phil.
Steph, you and I need to get on the committee members, make sure we have a quorum present.
For
at the next
sure.
meeting, You know,
Yes.
and that's gotta be our task. You know,
Okay.
we've gotta do that. You know, I understand we're betwixt between with COVID, but we've gotta have a committee.
Conservation,
Just
we don't have a
leave it
zone
alone.
that fits it,
Yeah, just leave it alone. for right
and,
now.
but we also felt that it wasn't a huge
Stressing.
push right now because it's not having its been
Yeah.
met. So we didn't wanna, miss giving the information, what's happening here, and jump to some quick answer
Yeah.
there, that,
Yeah, we think this will give you the tools to deal with the pressures that you're feeling right now. And then we hope to have a lot more tools in the bag by the end of the year and suggestions on
I'll forward you this, just,
I've got it.
okay.
I remember when Brandon gave us it.
Yeah, I remember when he gave it, there was some things in it that I didn't like, but there were some things that I thought were really awesome and could be really incorporated.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Brandon's pretty creative.
I don't mind, I mean, those, they're just, it looks the same, you know, then you look at those and you know they're apartments. I like the ones that kind of have a little bit of a different feel, but I think the
So the
cottage court's kind of cool.
Well, yeah, and the cottage
26.
courts, you know, can have unique personalities,
Yep.
you know. and
Yeah,
that-
for
that-
sure.
That is a great concept
But
that we
it's-
can use.
There's
with-
not a
with
lot of parking, they're not like, you know, from the street, you probably wouldn't even realize what that is.
Yeah.
It would just look like, you know, so there's ways to do that, but,
Okay. Do we have any other things we want to discuss tonight before we end?
I don't. think so.
John, anything we've missed? Joyce, anything we've
yeah,
missed?
the comments, last night was.
John, you have anything to share with us?
Okay, thanks. We'll see y'all later. Twice excited.
If you want any mask spray, I have some extra, I made this for.
Now, what is that? Mask spray?
It's orange and peppermint and it's.
Oh,
It's
that's
germ
nice.
killer, it's really awesome, so
Oh.
anybody who's done it, wanted it.
Yeah.
If you're
Come
if you're still wearing masks.
I have to wear.
Yeah, if you wear them